The bigger the decision, the bigger the legal matter, the more important that decision is to pick the right lawyer. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to interview them. Don't just make a decision because of an ad on a TV or a billboard or an airplane or wherever it is. I tell my people, treat people the way treat the clients the way they want to be treated. Because every one of them is different. Some people like texting, some people like email, some people like Zoom, some people like, but let's work and let's figure out each client and let's provide the services in the way they want it.
Welcome to Hot Docket, the show where we talk about winning marketing strategies that have built the most successful law firms.
Join us every 2 weeks for the latest trends and tactics to grow your law firm.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Hot Docket Podcast. Today we have on with us David Craig of what might be one of the greatest attorney firm names ever, Craig Kelly and Faultless. Epic. You guys just need to now commit a wrongdoing so you can be faultless. But thanks for joining us, David. Good to have you.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. Look forward to being on here with you guys.
Did you bring Mr. Faultless into the firm purely for the name, or?
This is funny. I mean, it's literally 30 years ago, he applied for a job as a law clerk of mine. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. I mean, first I looked at his resume, I'm like, brought the guy in. I'm like, your name really is Faultless? He's like, yeah. And so at the time I had a paralegal. Her name was Justice, and Kelly Justice. And so I thought, hey, so who would have known that, 30 some years ago, I would hire a law clerk by the name of Scott Faultless. And then he became my partner, and him and I've been practicing. I've been practicing for 40 years now. And this law firm, Craig Kelly and Faultless, is 26 years old, and him and I were together for 4 or 5 years before that. So I've known him for 30 years, but that really is his name. We didn't change it, but it's perfect for a personal injury law firm, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I think we've run into just a few in our career that are just absolutely perfect for personal injury.
Well, you said Justice. We spoke to
Micah.
Yeah, Micah Justice Liberty.
Yeah.
Micah Justice Liberty and it's a real God-given name. She didn't change it. And that was one of our first episodes.
The other one that we thought was excellent was, I think there was a Robin Hood. That was at Morgan. that does Hood. Disability. Yeah. It's like, you can't get much better than that. If you have a name that rhymes with car, something like that.
I actually I tried sending him a LinkedIn message. He never responded to me. There was a guy who was Carrion, Carion. And I said, if you're not running ads right now that are something like keep calm and carry on with your last name, then you're doing something wrong. Yeah. But he never responded to me. So I don't know. That guy's missing out.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, on the topic of truck accidents, which I know is a flawless transition here, I'd love to talk a little bit about your practice. So one thing I saw on your guys' website, and I'm curious to hear if it works, because you're one of the few firms, some firms do it, but not the majority. You have an ebook kind of front and center on your landing page, get help after a devastating truck accident or something to that effect. Has that been a successful tactic for you?
So it's interesting. I mean, so when I started my practice, I'd say 80% of my business was referrals from other attorneys. But I decided to start marketing to consumers. And so that's, a book is more directed towards a consumer. I mean, obviously you can write books to lawyers. So we probably about 12 years ago or so, I decided to switch and go to the consumers. And I think if you're going to advertise to consumers, then you need to provide helpful information to them. And so I've written 2 books. The first book I wrote was Semi-Truck Wrecks, a guide for victims and their families. And it just kind of walks them through the process, because the reality is most people have no idea what to do if they've been in a semi-truck wreck or any kind of personal injury case, and they don't have a clue. And so we wrote the book to give guidance to people, and it was extraordinarily successful, not necessarily in just bringing business in the door, but more importantly, it was something that people could use. I got a lot of comments all over the country, people who would never hire me in states that I'm not practicing in, thanked me for the book. It was a bestseller in the legal area. And so I got a lot of satisfaction out of writing the book. It helped, provided information. Where it's helped me, and I guess in converting clients, is that when people are looking for a lawyer and they're looking for a truck accident attorney, and so they maybe Google it or whatever they do, and they find maybe 3 or 4 firms that they're looking at. Not many of them have written a book that they can send in the mail to them, where they can say, look on my website, and it's free there, or I'll send you a book and I'll overnight a book to them and say, before we meet in the morning, if you want to meet in the morning or whatever you want to do. And I've had actually clients bring my book into meetings with me, potential clients, that were narrowed it down to a few people, and the book made a difference because it was simple. It was kind of a guide, what they should do, how they should do it, and what they should expect. So that was extraordinarily helpful. I just finished a new book this year titled "It's Never Been Easier to Pick the Wrong Attorney." And so, in this day and age, man, it's so simple to pick and click and get the wrong attorney, and then all of a sudden it's devastating consequences to you. So I wrote that one as more general. It's not just personal injury. It's how do you pick the right attorney, and how do you avoid picking the wrong attorney? If you pick a criminal attorney and you pick the wrong criminal attorney, you may end up in prison. You do a divorce. If you have a divorce case and you're fighting over custody, or so, you pick the wrong attorney, then the other side gets all the money and the spouse and the kids and the dog. And so I wrote a book and said, people as lawyers, if you're in the business, you kind of know who to look for and who's good and who's not good. And I thought ordinary folks could use that information. So I've written 2 books. Both of them have been extraordinarily helpful in converting clients or potential clients to clients, and also providing information, which also then helps you, as you guys know, as far as putting out information and content, and utilizing that for other purposes.
It also makes you a subject matter expert. So if you want to go to conferences and speak on those sort of things, you might be one of the only people with a book on those subjects. I want to dig in a little bit to the how not to choose a lawyer and run us through some of the basic ones there. Like, assuming you were a potential client, you knew nothing about legal, what are some of the pitfalls or some of the red flags on a bad lawyer?
Yeah, I mean, so there's so many different ones, but people have a tendency. I mean, you can't. Heck, I was going to the bathroom the other day, and went into the urinal, and there was an ad for a lawyer over the urinal from a criminal defense lawyer. I was in a bar, and so I thought, well, that's unique. But is that really the best lawyer to handle my criminal case? I don't know. And so the reality is, there's a lot of folks who advertise. You can't go to a ball game now without seeing cars wrapped, billboards, signs inside the stadiums. You can't, you Google and you got all these ads that are paid ads above the search. You look at all these different places, and everybody kind of says a lot of the same things. We're great. We've been practicing for 150 years combined, which I never understood why you'd pick somebody that could be like 150 lawyers with 1 year experience. But anyway, and so you see a lot of the same stuff. And the book is just like, hey, the bigger the decision, the bigger the legal matter, the more important that decision is to pick the right lawyer. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to interview them. Don't just make a decision because of an ad on a TV or a billboard or an airplane or wherever it is. Don't make the decision. And depending on what an area it is, for example, the ABA has board certification that they say, hey, look, there's certain lawyers that have certain level of expertise that they qualify as specialists or experts in this area. And so, and they have it in estate law, criminal law, family law, trial work, trucking. And so in order to be an ABA approved group and to be board certified, you've got to have a certain amount of experience. You've got to have credentials. You've got to be vetted. And then you also have to pass a test. And so you have to have a number of years, and a certain percentage of your practice has to be in estate planning or criminal, or in my case, truck accident law. And so I'd say a good place to start, if you don't know, you don't have referrals, or you don't know have people you can contact, is start off with, okay, who are board certified lawyers in the particular area of expertise that I need, because they've already been vetted. Now narrow it down to 3 or 4 of those lawyers and go interview them. And don't be afraid to talk to them. And here's some questions you should ask them, and then, and so I think that's the start. I mean, I would start there if you don't know somebody, but just because somebody advertises doesn't make them a bad lawyer, but it doesn't necessarily make them a good lawyer either. Just because somebody is a board certified may not be the right lawyer for you. So, you know, especially in my area, a catastrophic truck case could take years to prosecute, and you're going to be with them a lot, and they're going to be with their team. And so I tell people you should interview the lawyer and make sure you're comfortable with them. I do the entire team. You know, you got a lot of lawyers, we have big egos. And so you get this ego and they say, I'm the best. I'll stand on trucks and wave my hand, you know, whatever the hell they're doing. And the reality is that lawyer may never even touch your file. And so I say, you know, you should meet the whole team. I want to see all the lawyers, all the paralegals, who's going to be working on my case. And, you know, and a lot of times because I've written books, people will say, well, I want to make sure you're the attorney. I say, well, that's a really bad decision, because there's some things I do really well, and there's other stuff I do horribly. The last time I wrote a brief, I misspelled something in a caption, and it was ridiculous. But I have really smart lawyers who write really good briefs. And so we're a team. You don't want just me. You don't want just the brief writer. You don't want my partner, Scott Faultless. He's great at briefs. He's great at, he does a lot of appellate work, and he keeps the verdicts we get. And I can't imagine practicing with anybody else but him. But the reality is you get both of us. And he's really good at some things. I'm really good at some things. And we're both bad at other things. So but people are kind of intimidated and afraid. And why I wrote the book was like, no, you shouldn't be. This is a huge decision, whether it's family law, criminal law, personal injury, truck accident. This is a huge decision, and it's going to affect you for the rest of your lives. Here are some questions you should look for. And so that's kind of why I wrote the book. And that's kind of how I would start. If I was looking for a truck accident attorney, I would start off board certification. There's less than 100 of us in the whole country. There's 4 in Indiana, 2 of them in my firm. And then I would interview them and see, you know, if there's somebody that I like, or I care about. I had some people come in the other day that read my book, and so they were interviewing me, and so they said, "Well, we haven't chosen. We've narrowed it down to 3 people, just like you said in your book." And I said, "That's absolutely, that's all I ask. I mean, I just make a right decision." And they go, "Why? You want to know who your competition is?" I said, "No, I don't care who my competition is. As long as you're using the questions that I have in the book, I know you'll get the right answers, and hopefully you pick somebody who's competent and who's capable of doing the job." I said, "Well, why should I pick you?" And I said, "Well, you're going to be spending the next couple of years with this team, and you want to see their whole team, and you want to make sure you're comfortable with their team. But then you also want to know how this lawyer treats you. I would really appreciate the opportunity to work for you. I really would. Other lawyers may make you feel like you should feel grateful that you have them as your lawyer." I go, it's a subtle difference, but it's a huge difference when you're spending 2 years with somebody.
Huge difference.
And I said, so and you know what? They came back and hired me about a week later, and they said, "You're absolutely right. These lawyers had these giant egos that told them how great I am as an attorney, and you talked about us and our problems and how you're going to help us, and you were the only one that had a whole team that sat in the meeting." And so I wrote, I think those are things you want to do. You don't want to, somebody's been out there too long. They may have been great at one time, but they may not be good anymore. So you don't want to assume just because I've been practicing 40 years that I'm still good. You need to verify it. Check it out. See what I'm doing. Ask if I tried any cases lately. How am I doing? What kind of trial results do you have? And people are afraid to ask those questions. They're intimidated. And I hope to empower people through knowledge and make sure that they know what questions to ask, because there's no wrong questions.
Yeah, I do think choosing a personal injury lawyer might be one of the hardest areas, because the differentiation is extremely difficult. One, the price is the same across the board because it's contingency. So price is not a factor that potential clients are going to look at. 2, if they look at the verdicts and settlements, you might have a big $500,000 settlement, but what was the policy? If it was $1 million policy, that might be bad. Like, that might be a very bad settlement. And from most firms' websites, there's almost no differentiation from firm to firm. So it is actually very difficult for customers to do it. And one of the things that we have seen is that most firms don't even pick up the phone. Yeah. So they're going down the list in Google, they're calling all the firms, and they're just hiring the first one that actually picks up the phone and talks to them as like a human, which is crazy to think about, because The cases have such high value and they're catastrophic injuries, and they can't even get an attorney on the phone.
Yeah, and it's crazy is that, I mean, I went in the business to make a difference in people's lives. And not, I mean, the money's nice, it comes, but that's what wasn't motivating me. And now I can honestly say I've been practicing 40 years. And when you call after hours on the weekends, it goes to my wife. And to give you an example, I was having ice cream with my grandson, my wife, and a truck accident in Illinois happened. And these people were extraordinarily upset. They call in after hours, it gets transferred to my wife. My wife says, I'll talk to him. I'll let you talk to my husband, who's the partner. And I step outside. I tell my grandson, I'm sorry, you finish your ice cream, I'll be outside. And I immediately go out, and then they get done with their ice cream. They ride on the way back home. And I'm talking to these folks the entire way. But why wouldn't you do that? I mean, this is why I chose to be a truck wreck lawyer. I chose to help people in the worst of their times. Why the hell would I not answer the phone and talk to these people? Why would I have some service, who knows where, answering the phone and talking to these people? And so I still do it. And I still get excited about it because you're making a difference in these people's lives. And honestly, you're right. People don't know whether a settlement is a good settlement or a bad settlement, but people sure to heck know how they were treated in the process. And yeah. I think that makes all the difference in the world.
I think that initial intake is make or break for most PI firms, because that is beyond them looking on your website about what you say about yourself and the firm, which everybody's pounding their chest, showing huge verdicts and settlements, showing like a great history, good profile pages on all the attorneys. But at the end of the day, it's that first call and how they feel and how they were treated on that call. And most firms totally fumble that.
Yeah, I agree. And I have a person with a psychology degree who does my intakes. Again, I'm not a big volume practice, so I'm a niche practice. We're looking at higher end cases, truck accidents, catastrophic injuries and death. And so I have somebody who has a psychology degree who handles those first calls and then transfers it to an attorney. But he's good at listening. Not all lawyers are good at listening. He's good at listening. He cares. I have a social worker. I just hired somebody who has a social work degree, and that person spends time with all my clients on the front end and is part of every team that my clients meet. And I don't see a lot of firms doing that, but I think that's a trend that we'll see, especially with AI, that, AI will help us do the paperwork and the administrative and all that kind of stuff. And so what you really need are people who are empathetic, who are passionate, who listen, who help guide people. And so that certainly is the way our firm is moving.
David, I've been like itching to ask this question because you're kind of in a somewhat similar place to what we are in insofar as how do you scale? How do you get bigger while maintaining quality, right? For you guys, because you're dealing with such significant events and catastrophic events, it's like of utmost importance that everybody in your team is highest quality. And we kind of view ourselves the same way. I always say we're like a Goldilocks zone agency, not too little, not too big. But as we grow, how do we maintain like our quality standards? What do you think is like the perfect size law firm where you're big enough where you've got process and kind of like, what works, what doesn't, but you're not so big where you don't smell like the sheep, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. I think, so my law firm is about 50 employees, 10 lawyers. And I think, and what I did here recently was I hired a computer system engineer from a huge company. And he's like, I sat down with him. He's like, I don't know anything about law. I said, I don't give a shit. I'm not looking for somebody who knows a lot about law. I need somebody who can develop software, who can develop systems, who can help workflow. Because to answer your question, it is harder to find more and more great quality people. So you've got to have your great quality people doing the more important things. And you've got to remove everything else from them. And the best way to do that is develop systems and workflow and, adopt, in our case, utilize AI, utilize computer software programs that can free your people up to do more work and to do higher quality work. And then you have to be really careful in hiring people. I think that my law firm has 10 lawyers. all the lawyers in my firm, with exception of one, were either a law clerk of mine or a legal intern. Now, it has slowed growth because you can only hire so many law clerks, that you keep that are really good, but you vet them, you get to know them, you get to know their families before you ever hire them. And so my firm is 26 years old, and my Scott Faultless, like I said, I hired him 30 some years ago as a law clerk. And so all these lawyers are really good, and you bring them up, and then you send them out and train them to the Laniers, to all the different trial lawyers that are running trials things. And you have to say, you have to be careful of your own ego, because a lot of law firms are driven by a person with a big ego, and they don't really want people to be better than them, secretly. But the reality is, I take a lot of pride in that all my lawyers are really good lawyers, and they're getting better. And I think that's hiring the right people. But then the other crazy thing is like, so many paralegals, the ones that have a lot of experience, are pretty set in their way, and they come from a traditional PI firm. And I've quit hiring them because so many law firms are geared towards profit only. How many cases, whatever that, and that's just not going to work in our firm. And it's okay for other firms, but it's not going to work in our firm. And so I have fired people who make me a lot of money, but they're not the right team. And if you're going to scale, you better have the right team. Everybody better be on board on the quality of your services. What is going to distinguish you from somebody else? And I can say, you can look at my reviews, you can talk to my clients, and you're going to find not only are we not afraid to go try cases, but more importantly, we'll treat you in such a way that you're going to be happy to refer clients to me in the future, whether it's from the onboarding with a social psychology person, with a social worker, with my team. That's not the old school paralegals that we're used to. So we're moving in a whole different direction. I think reinventing how we practice is how you scale. And you have to look at it from like, hey, look, let's forget everything we know. Let's look how we can become more efficient, and how we can provide, hire nurses, hire social workers, hire psychologists, to help run files versus paralegals.
Yeah, one example that I can give in the asbestos litigation, like vertical, you'll see that they all have books now. So they're all doing something very similar to what you said. Mm-hmm. And on the intake side, they've actually hired doctors because people are calling about a very serious medical condition, and they want the best experience right off the get-go. So if you look at that and compare it to the world of PI, where the intake department is usually, it leaves a lot to be desired with the way they treat people in most intake processes. So I think you're pretty spot on in the way you're developing your firm.
I think trying to treat people the way they want to be treated, you hear that, I'll treat people the way I want to be treated, but I tell my people, treat people the way treat the clients the way they want to be treated, because every one of them's different. Some people like texting, some people like emails, some people like Zoom, some people but let's work and let's figure out each client, and let's provide the services in the way they want it. And as a result, as you know, referrals are a huge part of our business. And if you do a great job for people, then that's a lot cheaper than having those people out there getting you business and referring business to you.
All right. I think this is a pretty good stopping point, David. We talked about everything from books to AI to trucking to Faultless and what lies between there. So I think we're going to call it now. But thanks so much for joining us on Hot Docket. We all learned a ton. And anybody, if you get injured, God forbid, in the Indiana, I think you're Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, that kind of corridor, right? If you get injured anywhere there.
Lawyer's license in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Iowa, Missouri, and Indiana. So,
well, if anybody gets hurt there, Faultless is the one to call. God, I love it. All right, see you on the next Hot Docket. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Hot Docket. We're your hosts, Bobby and Andrew, founders of MeanPug, the marketing agency for ambitious law firms.
Have questions about marketing or anything we covered today? Email us at mark@meanpug.com. Be sure to subscribe to learn more. Until next time.